Tonight, Will Wirtz is going to teach a class called For Peace in Ukraine, President Trump Must Crush the British-French Entente Cordiale. Will Wirtz was one of Lyndon LaRouche's closest and most trusted associates for decades, and wrote many books in that capacity, among other things. More recently, he's published the book Beware the British East India Company. So, with no further ado, let me bring on Will.
Hi, Tony. Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone who's listening. This is really a momentous occasion. Just yesterday, we had the meeting in the White House between President Trump and Zelensky of Ukraine. And today we have the so-called No Kings demonstrations throughout the country. And what I'm going to be discussing is, as Tony indicated, something which is called the Entente Cordiale, which was created in 1904 and persists to this day. It's an alliance between the Anglo-Dutch, specifically the King of the United Kingdom, Charles III, and the French. And this is an ongoing alliance from 1904, as I indicated. The 120th anniversary was in the year 2024. That is last year. Now, we're told that the British Empire no longer exists. We're told that Intifada does not exist. But I would like to quote Charles Baudelaire, who said, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist." And another individual by the name of Ken Ami, I'm not really familiar with him, but what he said is to the point. He said the second greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he is a good guy. Now, what I would like to do is just start out with a picture of, number one, of King Charles III with Zelensky. Okay, so we're told that King Charles is pretty much of a figurehead, impotent character who talks with vegetables. I'm sure he does talk with vegetables. Maybe that's why he's talking to Zelensky here. But the fact of the matter is, when Zelensky appeared in the Oval Office with Donald Trump a number of months ago and disrespected the United States and had to hightail it out of Washington, D.C., he went directly to see King Charles III, who is his sponsor. Next picture, please, of Starmer, Macron, and Zelensky. As usual, as you can see here, Macron is groping anyone that he can within his immediate vicinity. But the key to this is Zelensky not only hightailed it to see his sponsor, King Charles III, but he also is basically manhandled by Starmer and Macron. This is a when days before Donald Trump was inaugurated in January of this year, the British signed a 100-year security agreement with Ukraine, with Zelensky. And within a very short period after that, they formed what they called the Coalition of the Willing. What they were trying to do is to preempt Donald Trump's inauguration and his efforts to establish peace in Ukraine, which he had campaigned on in his successful presidential campaign. So these are the two handlers of Zelensky in behalf of King Charles III. Now, I would like to just mention to people the fraud that the No Kings demonstration occurring today represents. King Charles, before he became king, as Prince of Wales, was the patron of all three British intelligence agencies. That is MI6, MI5, and GCHQ, which is the largest British intelligence agency. These agencies were directly involved with the Obama-Biden administration in the 2014 Maidan coup d'etat in Ukraine, which launched the Ukraine war. And that coup was part of a deliberate British geopolitical policy of making sure that Ukraine was allied with NATO and the EU as against Russia, which has been a longstanding objective of the British. It basically is you can read about this in Zbigniew Brzezinski's The Grand Chessboard. It's a reflection of Halford Mackinder's Geography as the Pivot of History, which was written in 1904, and which basically laid out that you had to control the world, you had to control the heartland of Eurasia, which is essentially Russia. And Ukraine was a key element of that. Now, at the same time, Charles, as patron of the three major intelligence agencies of Great Britain, was involved in fostering the Russian hoax in order to overthrow President Trump, the President of the United States of America. And he worked through Dearlove of MI6. He worked through Robert Hannigan of GCHQ. And they worked directly with Brennan, Comey, and with the Obama-Biden White House to as well as the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign to foster the Russian hoax against Donald Trump. So those people who are demonstrating today against Donald Trump as an alleged king are actually working with King Charles III against the President of the United States of America. That is what we're seeing today. And what they're hoping to do is to bring about, through a Jacobin mob, as in the French Revolution, a color revolution in the United States. This is exactly what they did on the Maidan in 2014 in Ukraine, overthrowing the constitutionally elected president. And I would also point out, kings are not elected. Donald Trump was elected. He had a majority of the popular vote. He had the majority of the electoral college vote, et cetera. And he won all of the swing states. So he was elected. He didn't come into power through hereditary succession, as King Charles did. And we should also recognize that King Charles is the fourth great-grandson of George III, against whom we fought a revolution, from whose tyranny we declared our independence. So this whole demonstration today is a complete fraud from an historical standpoint. They are the people who are demonstrating, many of them don't know any of this history, and they're just manipulated. But the fact of the matter is, they're doing the bidding of the actual king, King Charles III. Now, let's continue with with King Charles and the British role in terms of Ukraine. Next picture, which is of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, as you know, was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And in 2022, he traveled to Ukraine to convince Zelensky to keep fighting, even though the Ukrainians had signed an agreement with Russia to end the war. This was at a conference in Turkey. So Johnson, who recently was exposed as having received a £1 million contribution from a major arms manufacturer, who he brought along with him to Ukraine on many of his visits. This is a reflection of the British role in fostering the Ukraine war. They played a pivotal role at that point. And it's also well known that the British intelligence and has been directly involved with the actual carrying out of the war in Ukraine, including the attacks on the bridge in Crimea, and it's suspected that they may have been the ones who were actually involved in the blowing up of the gas pipelines. Not necessarily. Biden may have been aware of this and have been complicit in this, as Seymour Hersh says, but the British played a central role in this whole operation. Now, let's see the next picture, which is the Daily Mail, where King Charles says Putin is behaving just like Hitler. So we're led to believe that the British Empire doesn't exist, and that the King of Britain is just a titular position. It has no power. But as what I'm explaining to you, he was the patron of all three intelligence agencies. And after he became of Britain, and after he became king, he decided to retain his patronage of the GCHQ, which is the central intelligence agency of Great Britain. So this is King Charles speaking out against President Putin of Russia, calling him Hitler. Now, the role that of the Entente Cordiale, again, something that is not understood whatsoever. Most people have never even heard of it. Is crucial in this overall situation. France and England had been at war from the year 1109 until 1815. There were major wars between England and France, including the 100 Years' War, basically running from the mid 1300s to 1453. There was also the 7 Years' War between France and England, which was basically 1756 to 1763. And this was actually a global war. It was fought in India. It was fought in North America, where it was known as the French and Indian Wars. But as a result of that war, France gave up New France, which was an extensive possession in Canada, extending into what became the United States. And Russia and Great Britain consolidated its empire in 1763, the crown jewel of which was India. Now, after, and then of course you had the Napoleonic Wars after the American Revolution. Britain, despite establishing its empire in 1763, supported the American Revolution in a very decisive way. This outraged the British, and then what they did is they launched a campaign against the French
France
king.
France supported France supported the American Revolution.
France supported the American Revolution. This outraged the British, and they launched the French Revolution. The French Revolution, the Jacobin mob, involved Jeremy Bentham in Britain, who supported the French Revolution. He functioned in the Foreign Office of Shelbourne in Britain. He became he was awarded honorary citizenship of the after the French Revolution of France. Two of the leading French revolutionaries, Danton and Marat, spent considerable time in Great Britain. When they were under fire in France, they fled to London and then returned to carry out the revolution. Danton was the one who voted for the execution of the king of France. After this, Napoleon, very interestingly, initially had an alliance with Tsar Paul I of Russia to invade India so as to expel the British East India Company from India. But he backtracked on that commitment. Paul I of Russia was assassinated by a palace guard that worked with British intelligence. And then instead of invading India, Napoleon invaded Russia. After he was defeated, both by the Russians and also by the British at Waterloo, there has not been another war between the British and the French. This is, as I mentioned, this is what Queen Elizabeth said when she visited France in the year 2004, which was the centennial of the Entente Cordiale between France and England. So there was a first Entente Cordiale in 1843. Queen Victoria visited France, and this was rather informal, but the basic idea was there was a consolidation of a British-French alliance. And after 1843, the French joined the British in the Second Opium War against China. The French also joined the British in supporting the Confederacy in the U.S. Civil War. And this alliance, in a certain sense, culminated in the 1904 British-French alliance, which was the second Entente Cordiale, but it's the one that is most significant. And that was in 1904. There had been discussions of an English-French alliance as early as 1881, but the decisive moment was an incident which occurred in Fashoda in what is now South Sudan in the year 1898. The British were hoping to create a colonial area which went from Cairo in northern Africa all the way down to Cape Hope in southern Africa. And Cecil Rhodes, for instance, wanted to build a railroad from Cairo to Cape Hope. The French, on the other hand, had colonial possessions in Western Africa and wanted to develop and they also controlled the caravans across the Sahara Desert, but they wanted to develop a railroad from West Africa through the Sahel, south of the Sahara, all the way to Eastern Africa. And the place where these two railroads would intersect was a place called Fashoda. And in the year 1898, the British sent 1,500 troops there. The French only had 100. There wasn't an actual battle, but the French were forced to back down in a humiliating way. This then led to the Entente Cordiale in 1904, where the French basically assumed a humiliating subordinate position to the British Empire, which persists to this day. Can you show the next slide, which is of Edward the Seventh? This is Edward the Seventh, and you can see that the subtitle L'Entente Cordiale. Edward Edward the Seventh was responsible for creating this Entente Cordiale, and this led directly to World War I, because what the Entente Cordiale was a British-French alliance against the Germans, let's see the second picture. This is another picture commemorating the Entente Cordiale. With Edward the Seventh and the president of France. Actually, the president who signed it in 1904 was Loubet, whereas this is the president in 1908. Now, what Fashoda did was to define spheres of influence for Britain and France. France basically was given Morocco, and Britain was given control over Egypt and Sudan. The French had built the Suez Canal, and it was financed by both British and French investors. But in the 1800s, the British were invited in by the Egyptians and controlled the Suez Canal. So part of the Fashoda Agreement was that the French would continue to have free passage through the Suez Canal. This becomes important later on in 1956, as I'll get to later. But this is the alliance, and it set up the power alliances for World War I with France and functioning as a subordinate to Britain against Germany. And that's in contrast to what might have happened, which was an alliance between Britain, Germany, and Russia, because the nephews of I guess would have been of Queen Victoria, were the Kaiser in Germany and the Tsar in Russia. So that would have been the alliance against France, but instead an alliance between France and Britain was formed, and that alliance persisted, as I said, to the present day. Let's see just some of the cartoons from this period, which make this clear. This is a picture of, on the one hand, Britannia, and on the other hand, Mariana dancing in celebration of the Entente Cordiale in 1908. Next picture, please. This is a cartoon about what happened at Fashoda. If you look to the left in the dog's food bowl, you'll see a bone which is inscribed with Fashoda, and the subtitle is "No Fight." French Poodle says, "Well, if I can't have the bone, I'll be satisfied if you'll give me one of the scraps." And so from this moment on, France became the French Poodle to the British Bulldog. Next slide, please. Here you have John Bull walking off with a French harlot, French prostitute, again showing the humiliation of the French and their subordination to the British. This is they're clearly and in the foreground you have the German Kaiser, who acts as if he's not impressed by John Bull and Mariana the harlot, but that is a depiction of what led to World War I. Next slide. And this is another cartoon of the Entente Cordiale with the British spider casting its web over France and beyond, and and you have the German eagle watching as this is occurring. All right, next slide. After World War One, this is a map of the British and French empires. The British Empire is in black, as you can see, from Egypt to South Africa. You have a continuity of British colonies, and I guess that's, I'm colorblind, but I think that's blue.
Oh, the British colonies are in red and the French are in blue.
Okay. Well, I'm colorblind, so that's a problem with. I'm sorry. So the French colonies are in blue. So you can see. And another irony of all this is the British, who were instrumental in the slave traffic through the British, for the Royal African Company, which was chartered by the British monarchy, at a certain point outlawed chattel slavery and claimed that they were opposed to slavery. But of course, they supported the Confederacy in the U.S. Civil War. And from the late 1800s on, there was what was called the Scramble for Africa, where the European powers, and especially the British and the French, took control of all of Africa. Other colonial powers, including included Belgium and Germany. But then you also have the British Empire in India, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, a couple locations in Latin America, Belize, British Guyana, and so forth. So that is the Entente Cordiale and the empire which these two colonial powers had. And in World War II, I just mention this because it's extraordinarily important. Franklin Roosevelt understood that Winston Churchill was fighting World War II not to free the world from imperialism, but to preserve the British Empire. Winston Churchill told FDR and also the British Parliament that he was not prime minister in order to preside over the dissolution of the British Empire. And in the middle of World War II, Franklin Roosevelt told Elliot, his son, the following: "When we've won the war, I will work with all my might and main to see to it that the United States is not wheedled into the position of accepting any plan that will further France's imperialistic ambitions or that will aid or abet the British Empire in its imperial ambition." But with Roosevelt's death, what we saw was precisely those two nations attempting to maintain their empire, albeit in a different form. There was so-called decolonization after World War II, but there was a new form of neocolonialism and of Anglo-Dutch French imperialism. And that's what we're seeing today. Now, and let me say also then, in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower, clearly understanding what Roosevelt understood about the French and the British, intervened to force the French and the British out of Egypt. Nasser had nationalized the Suez Canal, and the British and French invaded. Eisenhower acted decisively and kicked them out of Egypt. And among the things he used was financial pressure on Great Britain. He threatened to sell American bonds, very much the way in which President Trump has used tariffs as a financial weapon against the Anglo-Dutch French imperial forces, who have been involved in fomenting perpetual warfare throughout the world, whether that's in the Middle East, Ukraine, or elsewhere. So Eisenhower understood precisely what Roosevelt understood, and precisely what President Trump is up against in respect to the Entente Cordiale and the Anglo-Dutch imperial system. Now, again, you may wonder, well, does this Entente Cordiale still exist? After all, who in the United States has heard of the Entente Cordiale? Well, it does still exist. Let me can you show the next slide? This is the centennial or centenary of the Entente Cordiale. Was in 2004. And at that time, Queen Elizabeth went to France and gave a speech there in which she said, "Long live the difference, but long live the Entente Cordiale." And as you can see, this plaque has been put up by the Franco-British Society. The Franco-British Society, the patron of the Franco-British Society is King Charles III of England. So it's run directly by him. Now, then in 2024, the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale was celebrated. Can we have the next slide, please? So here you have King Charles III and Macron with their respective wives. And this, and then let's have the next one. This was at a state dinner. And this is King Charles of the Crown at the tomb of the unknown soldier in France. When he gave his speech in France, what King Charles III said was, I really believe in the friendship between the United Kingdom and France. I believe that it's essential in order to preserve our freedoms and peace in Europe. He concluded by toasting a new UK-France entente, no longer just cordial, but now amical. That is a more than just something which is cordial, but rather a deeper friendship. And then Macron lauded this entente amicale that unites our two fraternal peoples in an unwavering alliance. What King Charles also did was to say, I quote, "I would like to propose it also becomes an entente pour la durabilité." That is a partnership or an entente for sustainability. And then he continued, in order to tackle the global climate and the biodiversity emergency more effectively. This is what he told the French Senate. So this is an alliance not only to support Ukraine through the coalition of the willing, through the 100-year security agreement between France and between Britain and Ukraine, but it's also aimed at involving Europe in the fraud of human-induced climate change in order to carry out a policy of population reduction and post-industrialization or post-industrialism. Because if you believe that human-induced climate change is the result of human industry, then obviously you've got to move into a post-industrial society. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing uh, uh, the Earth, Gaia, as it's put. So this is the alliance that we're talking about, and of course, all of the no kings frauds that were out there demonstrating or supporting these demonstrations. And again, there are many people who may be participating in these demonstrations who've been manipulated into doing so by the media and so forth. But the actual sponsors of it have a worldview which is identical with King Charles and with his with Prince Philip and Prince Bernard of the Netherlands, who were the founders and operators of the World Wildlife Fund. Remember, Prince Philip is the one who said that if he were ever reincarnated, he'd like to come back as a virus so that he could solve the population problem. So that's what this is really all about. Now, and the point that I would make is that if President Trump is going to succeed in bringing about peace in Ukraine, he's got to crush this Entente Cordiale of France operating as a junior partner of Great Britain. This is the nexus that has got to be crushed. And I would add to that, obviously, the Dutch, because as I indicate in my book, Beware the British East India Company, the actual enemy is the Anglo-Dutch imperial system, which emerged from the British and Dutch East India Companies. And it's no accident that the last NATO summit was held in The Hague in the Netherlands. And the Secretary General currently of NATO is Rutte, the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands. And at that NATO summit, King Willem Alexander of the Netherlands addressed the gathering and gave remarks which were identical to the remarks that King Charles III has made in terms of supporting supporting Ukraine against what they consider Russian aggression. So what you're really dealing with here is an Anglo-Dutch imperial system with a French junior partner. Another action on the part of this Entente Cordiale and the Anglo-Dutch imperial system was, in fact, the creation of the European Union, which occurred after the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. The European Union was actually formalized in 2000. I believe 1992. Just a second, I should have it here. Yeah, I think it was 1992. And so what you have was the creation by Thatcher and Mitterrand, the junior partner of the British, the French junior partner of the British. They created the European Union as a precondition for German reunification. And all the nations of Europe were forced to give up their sovereignty and agree to a supranational organization, supranational currency, supranational bank, the European Central Bank, so that none of the countries of Europe have any control over their own economic and financial policies. And we have such unelected bureaucrats as von der Leyen from Germany, who's head of the EU, and Kaji Kallas, who is the high representative the EU and representatives of this Anglo-Dutch anti-Russian policy. So this is a picture of Wilhelm Alexander. You may not even have ever heard of him, but he and King Charles are the two kings that the No Kings protesters will never demonstrate against, because they're doing the bidding of these two monarchs. And so, to go back to what I was saying, President Trump is up against this apparatus. And if you look at what happened at the summit in Egypt, where the peace agreement was signed, President Trump humiliated both Starmer and Macron. You've probably seen videos of what happened. President Trump grabbed Macron's hand and refused to allow him to manhandle President Trump as he's wont to do with everyone else. President Erdogan of Turkey had also done something similar, where he grabbed Macron's finger so he couldn't grope Erdogan. But that's what President Trump did with Macron. And in the case of Starmer, he basically says, "Where's the UK?" And Starmer rushed up thinking he was going to speak, and Trump just turned his back on him, and Starmer, in a humiliated fashion, had to return to the back of the stage and look embarrassed as he was. And now we have the meeting with Zelensky. So before the meeting with Zelensky, what happens is that President Trump has the telephone call with President Putin, and announces that in 2 weeks there will be a summit between President Putin and Trump in Hungary. And of course, all of the EU has been up in arms against Viktor Orban of Hungary, because he wants to settle this war. And is opposed to sanctions, and is opposed to the entire EU bureaucracy, which has been looking for ways to try to bypass his opposition. But now they're in a position where Putin and Trump will be meeting in an EU nation that is not on the the favorites list of Britain, France, and the EU bureaucracy. So, as we move forward, President Trump is going to have to act in the same way that Eisenhower did against the British and the French in Egypt. And the best way to do that is for him to engage with President Putin in order to bring about a broader strategic alliance. The issue is not just Ukraine. Ukraine is important, but what's needed is a broader strategic alliance between the United States, Russia, as the pivot for creating an alliance between four powers. That is, the United States, Russia, China, and India. I don't believe there'll be a problem in bringing India into this alliance. But in the case of China, China is absolutely necessary for this alliance. But it is more wedded, perhaps, than either Russia or India to certain policies, such as climate change and free trade. And they will have to recognize that the agreement among these four powers to create a new Bretton Woods system will be more advantageous to them than adhering to climate change ideology or free trade ideology. It would be in their best interest and the best interest of all of humanity. And these four powers are the unique four powers that working together can defeat the Entente Cordiale once and for all, and create a new financial system, which will be based upon economic development and respect for national sovereignty. Under those conditions, it will be possible to defend the US dollar because we will return to a fixed exchange rate as opposed to the floating exchange rate, which was created following Richard Nixon's abandonment of the old Bretton Woods system in on August 15, 1971. We will also return to a gold reserve system. We will lift sanctions, which are standing in the way of collaboration among these four nations and other potential other nations which can potentially join this arrangement. And we can commit ourselves to great projects, industrial projects throughout the world. And of course, one of the things that came up in the meeting, in a telephone call between President Trump and President Putin, was constructing a tunnel between Russia and Alaska. Take about 8 years to build, according to estimates. And this is the type of program and collaboration which is going to be required to sideline and disarm the Entente Cordiale. Other nations in Europe can join this new Bretton Woods system. I'm sure Hungary will like to do that. I'm sure that Slovakia under Fico would like to do that. Perhaps the Czech Republic under a new leader will want to do that, as well as other European nations and other nations throughout the world who may have perhaps joined the BRICS nations out of desperation with the Anglo-Dutch policies being carried out by British agents in the United States like Biden and Obama. But we're on the verge of a golden age, as President Trump says, not only in the United States, but also globally. Economic development is the new name of peace. That's what Pope Paul VI said in his encyclical Populorum Progressio. And that remains the case today. That is what the future is. And I think we have to make sure that we're supporting President Trump in recognizing who the actual enemy is. Could you show the cover of the book? I wrote this book back in 2 years ago, 2023, because I felt that the policies of Lyndon LaRouche were not being adequately served, and in fact were in some cases being abandoned. He emphasized the role of the British East India Company, and of course the British East India Company was just one of many East India companies, including the Dutch East India Company. And there was also a French East India Company and a Danish East India Company. But the basic point here is that the conflict in the world has never been between the United States and Russia or United States and China. The conflict in the world is between the American system of political economy of Alexander Hamilton, Friedrich List, Henry C. Carey, Lincoln, McKinley, and yes, Franklin Roosevelt, versus the British system of Thomas Malthus, of Adam Smith, Lord John Maynard Keynes, Bertrand Russell, etc. And this is the fight that we're in today, recognizing that the East India companies, which emerged into the Anglo-Dutch imperial system, are the enemy of humanity. They can and must be defeated. And the means of doing that is to recognize that they are the enemy, recognize the role of the Entente Cordiale to this day, and put forward a broad program to eliminate their financial power, to eliminate their means of control, which is mainly ideological. Remember, Venice was just a city-state, and yet it controlled both sides in the 100 Years' War. It does not require a large army to run an empire. you can control it if you control the minds of the population and of the leadership. As we can see with the No Kings demonstrations. If you control the way people think, how then you're you don't have to have a large army, as the British once had. So again, as I said at the beginning, the devil's greatest trick is to convince you that he doesn't exist. The biggest trick of the British is to convince you that the Charles III and other British royalty don't have any actual power. They're just a formality. Convince you that the Entente Cordiale is something that occurred in 1904 but doesn't exist. It has no power today. Now, I think in a certain sense, they overestimate their power. And I think we're very fortunate having President Donald Trump, who operates from the standpoint of creating, of being disruptive of his enemy's best plans. And I think we're really at the point where we can expect a major breakthrough. I think we can expect that the war in Ukraine will end, but to sustain that, we're going to need a new Bretton Woods system, and we're going to need an alliance between the four powers: United States, Russia, China, and India. And so let me end with that.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating.